This is not going to be about a states' rights issue. This is not a religious liberty matter. We're not going to be using religious reasoning. This is going to be built upon the self-evident, common sense, research-supported reality that children fare best when they're raised by their married biological mother and father. And that when you redefine marriage, you legally redefine the family to make mothers and fathers optional in the life of a child.
You're listening to Faith in Action. I'm your host, Matthew Nowlin.
And I'm Shawn Graham.
We lead Conservative Christians of Tennessee, and we are thankful you're listening to this show. Conservative Christians of Tennessee exists to analyze political policy and politicians in Tennessee, and all from a conservative Christian worldview. We want to glorify God by helping you to glorify God, so please don't hesitate to send us any questions or comments via email. You can reach me directly by emailing matthew@tnchristian.com.
Or Shawn, SHAWN, @tnchristian.com.
And on X, I am @MNBookman. Today's show is sponsored in the West Tennessee area by the #1 lawn care company in the Mid-South, Herbie Systems. Without enough nutrients, your lawn becomes more susceptible to diseases and pests. To effectively keep weeds away from your lawn, you'll want to use both pre- and post-emergent weed control treatments. Trust this work to the experts at Herbie Systems. Call 901-451-8214 today and let them kill your weeds. Our scripture for today is from Psalms 127, 1-5. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Lo, children are an heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. Over the years on Faith in Action, we've interviewed many guests on the topic of marriage in Tennessee. The perversion of marriage is part of an enduring issue that hasn't simply threatened to damage our society, but has, in fact, damaged our society's very fabric. It has been a decade since the Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell versus Hodges imposed a redefinition of marriage upon the states, declaring that same-sex unions must be recognized as equivalent to the historic one-man, one-woman institution. This ruling repudiated the transcendent law rooted in our Creator's authority as outlined in Scripture and reflected in centuries of common law. As David Fowler has argued, Obergefell represents a damnable usurpation, damnable not as a pejorative, but as a description of actions that defy God's rights and sight, by elevating human preference over divine order. The court ignored precedents of common law and tried to turn marriage into a statutory creation subject to judicial whims. Since Obergefell, we've seen transgender individuals' marriages fully normalized under its umbrella, with states forced to recognize unions regardless of biological reality, leading to confusion in family law and child custody. Skipping a lot of significant milestones and jumping forward to 2021, we saw New York legalize commercial surrogacy in that year. Michigan repealed its ban of the same in 2024, and these practices, they just exploded post-Obergefell, and they commodified kids. They turned them into products of adult whims, and they severed them from healthy, normal, God-given biological ties. Now, thankfully, we have a Supreme Court that in some instances hasn't been afraid to correct long-standing errors, and this is going to be our hope and our guide in our discussion today. We're glad to welcome author, advocate, and champion of family rights, Katy Faust, to our show for the first time. Katy graduated from St. Olaf College with a bachelor's in political science and Asian studies. She is married to Ryan, and they have 4 children. She spent her first year of marriage in Taiwan before moving to Colorado, where Katy served as the assistant director for Chinese Children Adoption International. She founded Them Before Us in 2018 to make the child the center of every conversation about marriage and family. Along with her co-author, Stacey Manning, Katy published Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children Rights Movement. In 2023, the two co-authored their philosophy of worldview in Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. She serves on the advisory board for the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship and frequently collaborates with many great organizations such as Alliance Defending Freedom, the Heritage Foundation, and the Colson Center. Katy Faust, welcome to Faith in Action.
Well, that was a bang-up intro, Matthew. I mean, first on the bio, extensive, but also a pretty accurate recap of the legitimate damage that the redefinition of marriage has done. And obviously you guys are drinking David Fowler's brew because he has a very good understanding about how This decision by the Supreme Court has inverted decades or centuries of common law that recognizes the superiority and privileges the natural family, specifically the marital relationship that lends itself to the biological relationship between parents and child. And that what same-sex marriage has done is introduced a sort of schizophrenia in the law. We still have these common law recognition of the superiority of the natural parent-child relationship, but we now, in the name of non-discrimination, are creating a new model of the family, a new understanding of the human child, the state-constructed family, and the child as object to be distributed and assigned to different adults. And you have same-sex marriage to thank for the objectification of children in family law.
We've been a fan of your ideas for a long time, Katy, but you switched your header graphic on X to say end Obergefell, and you did it in big rainbow colors. And I told Shawn that we needed to introduce you to our audience. You and your husband have a great testimony. Can you share that with us? We want to keep this a Christian show. We want all our politics to be informed by faith. So what has the Lord done in you and your husband's life?
We were both raised in heathen households, divorced families in wildly liberal cities. And then God plucked us out of the muck and the mire, saved us. And then we grew together as baby Christians in college, got married right afterwards. He went on to become a pastor, graduated from Denver Seminary, then got his doctorate of ministry at Gordon Conwell. And I was just a really happy stay-at-home mom and pastor's wife. We're serious about doing ministry shoulder to shoulder together. And all we wanted to do was pastor and shepherd our church here in Seattle. And then, I just got really angry at the way the world was victimizing children. And so he graciously allowed me to devote a lot of time and energy and attention, whether it was family movie night when I'm like, enjoy the Avengers, I'm going to go upstairs and, or 2 a.m. or whatever, because, God lit a fire in me to crusade on behalf of children.
Yeah. The heathens came for you. They tried to cancel you. They tried to dox you. They thought what they were going to do was shut you down. And Katy, this is a blessing of God. Actually, what happened, he took what they meant for evil and you blew up, literally.
Yeah. I started blogging anonymously. I was filled with rage and drive, but I was like, but also, if I could not be identified, that would be great. Because I know what these people will do to you. They'll destroy you and your family and your church. And that's what they did. As soon as this one guy discovered my identity, he doxed members of my church. He wrote terrible reviews about us. I mean, people that didn't know that I had this a little anonymous blog were paying the price for me doing what I felt like God was calling me to do. But it very much was I am going to drive you into the ground and silence you. Like once the anonymity was gone, I was like, well, I guess I submit amicus briefs to the Supreme Court and run workshops at the United Nations and start a nonprofit that is now probably the most public facing organization advocating against things like gay marriage and surrogacy and child victimizing IVF and highly critical of divorce. I wouldn't have done it on my own, but the aggressive gay blogger was sort of the impetus for me actually doing, I think, what God wanted me to do, which was to be kind of global and very public.
Yeah. The vessel of wrath. For the conversation today, org and yousay.org that we plan on using, which is surrogacy. And you had a great short video on at whatwouldyousay.org, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But Katy, there's adoption, and then you go through what adoption is. Can we define surrogacy without defining adoption? I mean, is surrogacy really not just what adoption is not?
Yeah. From a children's rights perspective, they're actually exact opposites. Both of them begin with loss. That's probably where the conversation separates in terms of the similarities between the two. Let me just tell you what surrogacy is. This is especially important for our biblical listeners because they have heard and maybe they believe that there's surrogacy in the Bible. That's what Hagar was. She was the surrogate. And maybe that's what the handmaids of Rachel and Leah were. Like they were surrogates. No, they're not. No, that's not what surrogacy is. Surrogacy splices what should be one woman, mother, into three purchasable and optional women. So what are those three different aspects of motherhood that surrogacy says you can buy, sell, rent, trade, discard, do without, they're just optional for you. So number one is the genetic mother, the woman that provides her egg, the woman that grants the child 50% of their biological identity. The second one is the birth mother, the one in whom the child grows for 9.5 months and creates that critical foundational bond for trust and attachment. And the third is the social mother, the woman that is in the child's life every day, maximizing the child's fine motor skills, talking to them right at the baby's level, focusing on equity and equality and safety within the household, all the things that women naturally do well. Those are the three different mothers that surrogacy splices into three parts. And you can purchase the child's genetic mother from a catalog. You can rent the birth mother, for $60,000 in California or $20,000 in Mexico if you need like a bargain basement brown surrogate. And you can completely do without the social mother altogether. You can take the child home to a motherless household where they're starved of the maternal investment. Now, as God designed, you're supposed to have one woman be all three. And if you separate, in any sense, one of those three out of the child's life, or if they're not found in the same woman, the child experiences loss. Now, in adoption, sometimes the child loses their genetic and their birth mother, and they're raised by a different social mother. That is what a lot of adoptees call a primal wound, even though we seek to remedy it in adoption. But the child has experienced loss because those three mothers are not found in the same person. Surrogacy splices those women into three by design and calls it progress. So by that definition, you can look at Hagar or the handmaids, in the situation of Jacob and his wives. There's no surrogates in the Bible. All of those women were the genetic, birth, and social mothers. People will be like, well, Mary was a surrogate. I'm like, boy, shut up. Mary was not a surrogate. She was the genetic mother, the birth mother, and God hand selected her to raise him every single day. There's no surrogacy in the Bible. That is a modern invention brought about by IVF and the ability to lab make babies customized in a laboratory. And we have only had genuine surrogacy for the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
You have talked so many times, Katy, about the harms that a child takes upon themselves, and just the emotional, just the developmental. And I've enjoyed watching you on Twitter work through this. You recently just said, here's a reminder that unlike adoption, there's no screening, fingerprints, background checks, home studies, or post-placement visits for adults procuring children through surrogacy. It's a pathway for predators for that very reason. I would love to hear you expound on that statement.
And before you expound, I want to reinforce, just today we've seen an example that's exploding on X of two fathers who bought a child the same way that Dave Rubin of The Blaze did. In this quote-unquote couple, this so-called gay couple, one of the so-called fathers is a registered sex offender.
Yeah.
That's been proven now, hasn't it?
They're like, how could this happen? How did it get through the background checks? I'm like, you misunderstand. There is no background checks for this kind of thing. Nobody looks, nobody asks, nobody cares.
Yeah.
The only check that clears in surrogacy is the check at the bank.
Yeah.
I've posted several times about this couple over the last 24 hours, and I posted underneath one of them the article that I wrote about 5 confirmed pedophiles who acquired children through surrogacy that had a long list, had served jail time, had tens of thousands of images of child porn on their computer. They got kids through surrogacy. Nobody asks. This is not a benevolent nonprofit. These children are not known to social workers. In adoption, I know this because I was the assistant director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. There's rules about taking children across state lines, let alone across international borders. And I'll tell you what the biggest difference is between adoption and surrogacy, because everyone's like, oh, this is just 2 different forms of adoption. This is what I mean where I say surrogacy is the inverse of adoption. It's the exact opposite of adoption. And I know I'm saying this as an adoptive mother. In adoption, it is illegal for the intended parents, like my husband and I, to pay the genetic family or the birth mother to relinquish their parental rights and give us the baby. Money does change hands in adoption, but you're paying the home study agency to vet you. You're paying the FBI to screen you. You're paying the foreign government to evaluate the match and make sure it's okay. We paid $5,000 to the orphanage. We paid the US government to create a visa all of it generally goes towards caring for the child or making sure that you are not going to abuse them. That is what money in adoption goes towards. It does not go from intended parents to genetic parents or birth parents. But in big fertility, that's exactly where it goes. When you purchase sperm from a sperm donor catalog, or you purchase somebody's egg, you are purchasing the genetic material and the promise that they will stay out of the child's life forever. They are signing away their parental rights. When you hire a surrogate, they actually preemptively relinquish their birthrights through something called a pre-birth order. In adoption, we don't do that. The birth mother is the mother. And then very often she has days or weeks or months to decide whether or not she wants to take the baby back. In surrogacy, in big fertility, you are always having direct payments from the intended parents to the birth and the genetic parents. In adoption, what is categorically baby buying is the backbone of the big fertility industry.
Yeah. Wow. We need to end the gay dad loophole.
I would say you need to end surrogacy. Nobody should buy children. Sweet Christian heterosexual infertile couples, nobody should buy children. Nobody should pay a birth mother to hand over her baby. Nobody should purchase sperm or egg, even if we love them, even if they're godly, even if they genuinely have a God-given desire to become parents. No child should contractually lose their birth mother because some adult wants it that way.
Right. And it's not like there are no other options for these people to have children.
Well, there are limited options. And sometimes that is hard on adults. It's either hard on the adults or it's hard on the child. And a world of justice says it needs to be hard on the adults. Honestly, just because adults are sad or want something, even if it's legitimate, does not mean that a child has to sacrifice for them. And that is an area where the Christian world also needs to get their story straight.
Yeah. Can you talk more on that specifically?
Yes. So everything that I talk about triggers somebody. I tell people, like, give me enough time and I will also piss you off. So like a lot of times I'll be on podcasts and they'll be like, yeah, like no more gay surrogacy. What's up with these two dudes acquiring mostly male children? I'm like, yes, that's right. That's a big problem. Also, you should not divorce casually.
That's right.
It is very important for you to stick it out, because if you divorce, the vast majority of which divorces in the United States today break up low conflict marriages. About 70% of them are being broken up, not because there's abuse, not because there's addiction, not because there's adultery, but because somebody has fallen out of love. Because she's decided she needs to live her best life and he's not doing enough housework, or he's fallen in love with a young hottie or whatever, and the kids are going to be fine because they're resilient. No. When you divorce, your children are 45% more likely to die an early death, 40% more likely to become a teen mother, 60% more likely to go to jail. You're more likely to go to prison than graduate from college. If your parents are divorced, if your father is absent, you are inflicting a grave, lifelong harm on your children if you seek a casual divorce. So it's like basically every adult, single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, need to prioritize children above themselves. That means nobody gets a pass. Every adult has to do a hard thing.
Katy, in Memphis, the town where marriage doesn't really even exist anymore, you mean that we're going to have to actually stop prioritizing the early childhood development centers and we're going to have to actually start talking about marriage? How can you say that, Katy? You're going to upset churches.
And that's the thing, is like churches actually need to be the experts on all of this. Why? Because the church does not exist to validate adults. I think that we have gotten this absolutely wrong. I mean, I say this as a pastor's wife. We are ministering in a really hard area. Everybody up here doesn't want to unnecessarily trigger people, and everybody's trigger happy up here in the wrong sense of the word. But the truth is that everywhere that Christianity has gone, all throughout the world, in every century and every country, they have offended adults, but they've always protected children. Child protection and elevating the rights and well-being of kids goes hand in hand with genuine Christianity. Amen. And one place where children are being gravely assaulted today is in matters of the family. This is an area where the church needs to have a clear, loud, robust, unflinching voice.
Yeah. You know, if I could do two things, Katy, I would end no-fault divorce. I've talked with so many Christian family law attorneys who talk about the damage that they've seen from no-fault divorce. And then secondly, I'd overturn Obergefell. What is the next step in repealing Obergefell? Because I think we might be at a unique point in history where this can happen.
I think there's a possibility that it can happen, but not if we're stupid idiots the way that we have been so much of the time when we discuss this. I think that we have absolutely had unforced errors throughout our whole time talking about this. And so, as I've kind of hinted at on social media, my nonprofit is spearheading a national movement of major organizations, pro-family groups, Christian groups, conservative groups at the national level, at the state level, influencers, lawyers, so that we all can retake marriage on behalf of children. This is all a matter of justice for children. Our campaign, which we are building, is completely going to focus on why this all is a matter of justice for kids. This is not going to be about a states' rights issue. This is not a religious liberty matter. We're not going to be using religious reasoning. This is going to be built upon the self-evident, common sense, research-supported reality that children fare best when they're raised by their married biological mother and father. And that when you redefine marriage, you legally redefine the family to make mothers and fathers optional in the life of a child. That is the effort that we are spearheading and the coalition that we're building right now.
I love it. Katy, that is incredible. Anything we can do to get that message out, you're always welcome to come back here and talk with us. Are we in a abortion kind of mode right now? Do we think this is going to take 40 years of wandering in the desert again to change the prioritization of children?
How many policy efforts have you seen over the last 10 years to challenge gay marriage?
The only legitimate policy effort I've seen in any of the 50 states was David Fowler's effort in Tennessee to essentially make marriage a recorded after the fact common law type affair like it once was, to take away marriage licenses. And I've seen it in Alabama, something very similar, but only in Tennessee and Alabama that I'm aware of.
Very tepid. The truth is that we've had 10 years and nobody's tried anything. Nobody has forced the court to answer. When you said that you can't discriminate between heterosexuals and homosexuals, do you just mean in giving them marriage licenses, or do we need to award unrelated children to them as well? This is completely unexplored legal territory. What is the timeline? I don't know, because we don't have any information to go on. We are working on a judicial strategy with the handful of legal minds that both understand constitutional law, family scholarship, and who have spine. There's like 7 of them. We have all 7. So we are going to work on a robust strategy that is going to force the court to choose. You've got 2 different models of family that you can decide on. Do you want the natural family where children are born into a pre-political relationship with claims to their own mother and father? Or are children objects to be assigned? Do you support the state manufactured family? The natural family says that your right to your own child supersedes anything that the government decides. And a child's right to their own mother and father is more important than whatever a contract decides. So that is actually a check on government power. But if you go with the state assigned family, that means the state decides who is and is not a parent. That means that your relationship to your own biological children is significantly weaker or non-existent. That is the question that we need to put before the court. What form of family exists and should be elevated in law? Is the one where you decide every familial relationship and thereby destroy the decades and centuries of common law support all throughout our nation's history? Or do we go with the natural family, where there's some relationships that you are not there to construct, you're just there to protect? Now, I don't know how long it's going to take to find the right case, to work it up to the court, to make them decide, because no one has tried this yet.
Yeah, and I think standing is going to be an issue for sure. Definitely.
Don't you worry, Matthew. Don't you worry. We're working on it. I don't have all the answers. I just know the lawyers that do. So it's in the mix.
What I like about this is Obergefell was such a broad decision. And what you're talking about is phrasing questions in a way that causes the court to make repeatable decisions that are logical, that aren't scatterbrained. If the court doesn't answer them correctly, the court will be completely delegitimized. When Obergefell came around, we saw immediately an example of the law being pedagogical. The law taught and people's opinions started to just radically change. To the glory of God, we're seeing those opinions reverse. How long will it take us to re-educate society that we must put our children first?
It'll take forever if the church can't get its act together. That's one thing. I mean, if we don't even know how to talk about this, we who have access to special revelation and 613 commands where God, some of which he explicitly lays out that we have to care for the fatherless, not manufacture them, not legitimize the creation of them. So the church has to get its narrative straight first. Also, the conservative movement that is growing in influence, that is no longer bound by media gatekeepers, needs to right. And so a lot of this depends on, can we get people who start talking about this in a way that not just fortifies the choir, but brings more people in underneath that child protective umbrella. So that's the challenge before us.
I'm thinking how many pastors and weak-kneed elders are going to say that talking about what the family should look like is just too political for church. I'm kind of joking, but really I'm not.
Well, One of the things that we are going to work on is specific curriculum around this campaign for churches. And I already have the most incredible Protestant apologists and teachers involved in my theological working group. But I really need one Catholic for the church curriculum team. So if you're going to pray for me, that's one thing I need right now.
Great conversation. Katy, come back on with us soon.
I will.
Folks, that's going to do it for another episode of Faith in Action. We're glad each time you tune in each week from Nashville, Memphis, Clarksville, and all over Tennessee as we talk about more ways to put your Christian faith into action. If you want to hear more on this or other topics from a Christian worldview, head on over to botradionetwork.com and search for Faith in Action. There we have links to over 5 years of past shows, and you can listen to a wide range of guests sharing their wisdom about current events that affect Tennessee and the entire nation. And until next week, remember, the Lord shall reign forever and ever.